Welcome, mortals. The dead don't rest easy tonight. From suburban paradise to burial ground nightmare, we're exploring the twisted tale of Fox Hollow Farm, the restless spirits, and the unsettling idea of hallowed ground tainted by evil on the Parallax Podcast.
Hi, Willow.
Hi, Karissa. How are you tonight?
I'm just dandy, darling.
Just dandy, darling. Are you ready to hear all the awful things I have to tell you tonight?
Yeah, so for most of you listening, you should know by now that Willow presents cases that I don't typically know a lot about. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But for this one in particular, I don't know the details. What I do know is there has been something I've recently watched that this was somehow in it, but it wasn't the main focus. I don't know if it was like a Criminal Minds case where they kinda
Mm-hmm.
made a play on it, or if it was like, some other, like, fictional thing where they kind
It
of did
could
a
be.
little skirting around it. I don't know. I don't know the super details.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember seeing the house in this because I wanted to look up the map of the place and where bodies were found for a specific
Yeah,
reason.
yeah.
And then I wanted to kind of see, a couple other things, but I didn't look up the details, but I was like, "I remember this house." And I remember the little driveway that said Fox Hollow Farms or whatever, but I don't know why. I don't remember how I know that stuff.
Yeah, this one is definitely, I went down a little bit of I know we say it all the time, but we be going down rabbit holes.
Well, today we're going down a foxhole.
Yeah. And that's what I did for this one, mostly because this hit home for me because I grew up in Indiana and this happened in Indiana. It happened in Westfield, which is pretty close to Indianapolis. And I grew up in an area that was about, I want to say 45 minutes south of Indianapolis. And I just think it's insane that, being the true crime person I am and liking to, research all the different crimes and stuff, I didn't know about this.
Mhm.
And that, I ended up watching, there's a new docu-series on Hulu from, I think, like ABC Studios or something, that they went through and they brought to light a lot of new evidence because the coroner of Hamilton County, Jeff Jellison, just started his work on identifying these
'Cause
remains.
well, 'cause didn't they just reopen that in 2022?
Uh, yes. Yes. Yep.
Identify some of the bones because they were just
Yep.
kind of
Yep.
left there?
I mean, they're still working on it now.
Yeah, I did do a YouTube video to find the mapping because I couldn't find the actual map. I had to go there was a woman who mapped it out, and so I just kinda scrolled over to see when she was plotting
Like,
points,
I
like,
just need to see the plot.
I just need to see the points plotted. I don't need any information, and so I let it play through, and then she said something about, like, it's been reopened in and I was like, "Stop. I don't wanna know."
Yeah, they did in fact. And so that's kind of why I think it started to gain a little bit more notoriety recently. Now that people are finally like, oh, like they're starting to look into it more. And another reason, which is kind of going to segue right into us starting, to talk about this case here. There's a lot of people in Indiana who don't know about this or didn't know about this case, despite the scale of remains that were found on Fox Hollow Farms. Now, to set the scene to kind of help you understand why this is the case, this occurred in Indiana again, mostly the late 90s, like mid, or I guess early to mid 90s, a little bit in the late 80s, but Indiana during that time was incredibly conservative. It's still relatively conservative now, but even more so back then. Now, the murders at Fox Hollow Farms were centered mostly around gay people and the gay community. And in Indiana in the 90s, if you were going out to like gay bars and stuff, it was because you knew that they were there. There were still a lot of riots and such, so to speak, about people who didn't agree, with the lifestyle of the gay community. And when it came to the police force, they didn't really do much for the gay community. They
Mhm.
liked to brush them aside or find reasons to arrest them. And this is documented in this series. It's not just me, spouting my opinion. This is something that was said in this series from those who are part of the gay community and even from police officers who were saying back then this is how it was. That's
Mhm.
kind of why I think most people didn't know anything about this case because they didn't really do as thorough of an investigation back then as they could have, but also it was just the times, sign of the
Mhm.
times, so to speak.
Which is sad.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is very sad,
Yeah,
honestly.
human beings are human beings, period.
Yep, yeah.
The only
And I
people
mean,
that should have to die are those who kill others in sort of
exactly,
in
yeah.
a fashion.
And that's exactly what we talk about here. So this starts a little bit more specifically summer of 1993. Again, around 5 o'clock, the entire town of Indianapolis would close down except for the gay bars and gay clubs where people would go to. Now, there were rumors starting around the community between 1993 and 1995 that something was happening. However, when the individual started coming up missing, there wasn't much done about it initially, partially because with the gay community, people were moving away, they would find love, they would leave. But the 90s is also when the HIV and AIDS epidemic came to Indianapolis. And so people would be fine one week and the next they'd come in, they'd be so sick and they would die. And like these people were talking about entire friend groups dying from AIDS. And so when people initially went missing, the people at the bars, the bartenders, and their friends would just assume, okay, maybe that person was a victim of the AIDS epidemic. And also, Mark Lee, who was a photographer at the time, stated that policemen tended to think that the dying and missing individuals of the gay community deserved it. So, like, that was what they were thinking, you know? That was kind of working against them. Now,
A lot of the cases from back in the day where you hear, like, people of color or people of different types of marginalized communities were just brushed aside because, like, ugh, it's not important, you know?
what happens all the time? It's disgusting because just like you and I literally just said, and have, as we have said in other previous episodes, these people are still human. It does not matter one bit if you agree or not with their lifestyle. They are still a human being with feelings and families, and there is no reason why they should deserve to die. So finally, honestly, after a few years of them starting to realize that men were going missing, Mary Wilson, who was a missing persons detective who did a lot of work on this case, started to realize that these people were all from gay bars. They were all about the same size and about the same age. It got to the point where the gay bars actually began to warn patrons to ensure that their friends knew who they were leaving with and where they were going if they weren't leaving with somebody that they knew. And there was somebody on this docuseries that described that in one bar there was an entire wall filled floor to ceiling with missing persons posters. There's a lot of men going missing. Now, during this time, when they finally start looking into these missing men, there's really not a whole lot of information because a lot of the patrons didn't really want to talk to the police. They kind of already knew that they were going to be discriminated against and didn't really feel like they were going to be taken seriously. However, there was a person named Mark Goodyear who came into the police station with a story. He said that he met a man named Brian at a gay bar in Indianapolis who convinced Mark to come back to his house. When he got there, I almost forgot his name. Brian took Mark down to his basement where there was a pool room, like an actual like swimming pool room. And there were mannequins posed around the pool and bar. Like several mannequins posed as if they were supposed to represent like a party or like what people would be doing at a party.
Mm.
So they engage in consensual sex and then autoerotic asphyxiation, which I learned more about this than I needed to watching this docuseries. But the almost PG version, for those who don't know what that is, it is an act in which somebody achieves their euphoria, shall we say, through asphyxiation. So there's that. And based on
No, thank
this,
you. I like my breath of air.
yeah, I know. I'm like, I like to breathe. Thank you very much. But so, yeah, if you want to learn more about this, just watch this docu-series because I was like, oh, great. I now know a lot about this. So, and according to Mark's story that he initially told, he still ended up spending the night there. And then Brian took Mark back to Indianapolis the next day. And Mark said that he felt that Brian had done this before. He just got the vibe, so to speak, that Brian had done this before. And he couldn't lead authorities back to the house where he had gone. He couldn't remember anything else. And they knew that the name Brian was an alias. It wasn't really abnormal for gay individuals to use aliases so that they wouldn't be outed to the community if they weren't quite out yet. However,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. However, not too long after that, all of a sudden, Mark is able to go to the police station and say, "Oh, my friend saw the car," and wrote down the license plate. So they take the license plate numbers, they search the plates, and it goes back to a man named Herb Baumeister, who lived with his wife and 3 kids on Fox Hollow Farms in Westfield, Indiana. In May 1988 is when Herb purchased Fox Hollow Farms, which is a sprawling property with 18 acres of woods, trails, and a pretty large, sizable home. Like, this home actually is beautiful in a morbid way. And it's near all the other suburban giant homes. Like, it's in a really good
It reminds me
spot.
of those German kind of houses with the
Yes. Yes. Yes, absolutely. To give you an idea about how, Baumeister was seen by the community, he was a family man who went to church all the time. He owned several Save-A-Lot stores, which are kind of like Goodwill, the little thrift shops. He owned several of those after this whole situation was no longer a thing. I don't know for sure. But anywho, so they went to talk to Baumeister, of course, to, figure out if any of what they had heard from Mark could be corroborated. And Detective Wilson said that Baumeister was incredibly nervous when approached. She literally was on record saying that she felt like he was just going to topple over and crumble. Like, seemed so nervous when they approached him. And she attributed this at first to the fact that no one in his family knew that he was going to gay bars. Later on, I think there's a different reason for that, but it's fine. Anywho, now here's the thing. In 1994, so this is kind of right in the middle of all these men going missing, Baumeister's teenage son was playing in the woods with his friend. And all of a sudden, they come running back up to the house to their mom, Julie, who was home. Herb was probably at work. And his son comes up and goes, "Mom, I found a skull." And she's thinking, "No, that's wrong. There's no way you did." And sure enough, he holds up a stick, and on this stick is an entire human skull.
My gosh.
And so Herb says, "Oh, well, it must just be a skull from a dissecting skeleton from my dad, because his father was a doctor who did, in fact, I guess, give him a whole skeleton." So he goes, "Well, it must just be from that. And there's a raccoon in the garage that dragged the skull out of the garage, and that's why he found the skull." Lies. Anywho. Julie did not seem to believe this at all either. And
Really?
based off of some other, I think, just kind of sketchy things he was doing, I think once they started to look into Baumeister more anyway, and she started to probably hear like the rumors and the whispers around town, she started becoming suspicious. I know at some point she did find out that he was going to gay bars. She ended up starting divorce proceedings, and she was the one who ended up giving permission for the police to go and search the farm. Now,
Go,
you
Julie.
already know remains are found on the farm. I've already told you, you already had to go and look up like where they're at. Now, Karissa, when I say a massive amount of remains, how many bones or bone fragments are you thinking? If you had to come up with a number when I say massive amount, what number
I have
comes
to
to
be
mind?
fully honest, I already know this number.
You are a turd,
It's
Carissa.
not listen, girl, I told you there was things I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna know that."
I can't believe you.
Was it like 10,000 bones?
10,000 bones and bone fragments. 10,000 was found on the property. Okay. Now, I will say, just because they found 10,000 or more, because they are still looking, they're still going back and doing excavations and stuff. But just because they found that many doesn't mean there's 10,000 victims. One human body can create hundreds of bones and bone fragments if they were subjected to
Were they
the elements or
fragments or full
burning.
bones? Just fragments?
Some
10,000 fragments?
fragments and some full bones, because there were some piles. We're going to get into specifics in like literally a few sentences here, but there were some piles of bones they found that had been burned and some that had just been disposed of, like just dumped more or
So
less.
that could be, I mean, if we did the math on that, so if you have approximately 10,000 bones, bone fragments, and creating an outlier for some that haven't been found, you're looking at, like, 40 to 50 people. Okay. I'm interested to see how many people they've actually identified and, like
It's not that many. I think like 13 or less. Like it's not that, and that's why Coroner Jellison had started this process of no, I'm going to identify all of these remains. They deserve to have their names. They deserve to be remembered for who they are. Now, when it comes to where they found these bones, I want to kind of give you guys an idea of what this was like. So, like I was telling Carissa, there was one pile where it was mostly bone fragments because it had been burned. This burn pile, I believe, was the one that was closest to the house, like on the west side of the house, still within the woods, but I believe that one was the closest one. The other two piles that they found were just bones that had been dumped. And when I say that they had been dumped, there were bones just like laying on the ground. Like he hadn't even tried to bury them. They're just laying there.
weird.
Yeah, like they had pictures
I mean,
that they were,
so if they're just laying on the ground, where did their skin go?
don't
Did
know.
he, like, set them somewhere to decay first and then the bones were there, or did he have parts of the people there and they just decayed there?
That's the
How did that
thing, we don't
happen?
know. And I mean, like full entire, there was even a creek bed that was adjacent to the Baumeister property, or I guess to Fox Hollow Farms, filled, absolutely filled with bones. They were in the creek bed, they were on the bank, they were in full sight. They found like an entire jawbone with teeth still attached in there. They also found, I think it was an arm bone, I don't know which one, but it was an arm bone that still had handcuffs around it, which led them to
Which means
believe.
that means he let the body decay on its own and the bones were just left out there.
Yes. Yes. And so that led them to believe that there might have been some kind of torture, there might have been some kind of like ritualistic thing. They aren't 100% positive, but I was like that's just kind of disgusting. So while this is going on, while they're finding just tons and tons and tons and tons of bones, Baumeister had taken his son to a cabin on Lake, I think it's Wawasee, during the search. Now, Julie, as she's literally discovering the amount of remains that are right outside her door, she starts becoming more and more concerned about her children. Like, my lord, he, I don't think that he's mentally okay. And, you know, and so she ended up getting a court order to take the children away from Herb. Now, so they go, Carissa, and they serve the court order to him. They don't arrest him.
It's not.
They don't arrest him
No.
because
He's a prospering community member.
well, no, the prosecutor said, well, I don't think we have enough evidence yet. I'm like, oh, so the 10,000 bones in his backyard
So,
aren't,
it doesn't have
that's
to be
not enough
10,000. You
evidence?
can have, like, 510 from just 2 bodies, and that's
Yeah.
enough bones.
I was like, bro, that's not enough evidence. Anyway, so they didn't arrest him, and then they're like, oh, well, we don't think he's going to run. That was a awful, awful mistake because as soon as they took his son Eric away from him, he fled to Canada. They couldn't find him. They're like, oh, we're trying everything we can do to find him. They can't find him. They can't find him. They can't find him. And then finally, they get a call from the police in, I think it's Royal Police, but I'm probably very, very wrong. But they get a call from the police in Canada that let them know that Baumeister had taken his own life. And in his suicide note that he left behind, it just stated business troubles and marriage troubles, but absolutely nothing whatsoever about the killings. He didn't even acknowledge them at all.
Well, why would he acknowledge them? He thought these people were nothing.
Most likely.
And he probably thought what he was doing was not wrong, like most.
Now, I have something more to add to that we're going to get to in a few pages of my notes here. But I have thoughts about maybe why he didn't mention it, or at least why we didn't find the part of the note where he perhaps did mention something about those bodies. So now that we've gone through this whole situation of finding these bodies and what happened on Fox Hollow Farms, I want to take you guys on a little bit of a different perspective because you can find a little bit more about Herb and whatnot if you go listen to some of the older podcasts that covered Fox Hollow Farms. But recently, investigators are beginning to wonder if he acted alone. Because if you think about it, they suspected that he was killing these people in his pool room because of the witness reports and stuff that they were getting. Now, how does one man Now, Carissa and I just talked about this could be anywhere from like 40 to 50 or more bodies. It could be 30 to 40, like lots and lots of dead people. How does one man take this dead weight body and drag it 100 to 200 yards away from his home to get it to the woods to dispose of it? This many bodies. How does one person do that?
Well, I mean, and there's the adrenaline rush. We can look at it as like an adrenaline rush. We can look at it as like he used some kind of wheelbarrow or something. We can also look at it as if he had some kind of demonic help.
I mean, there's different ways you can look at it. However, there's also some very intriguing evidence to go along with this idea of there being an accomplice, or at least somebody who knew a whole lot more than they let on. Now, Teehee, funny story, the person who owns Fox Hollow Farms now, his name is Rob Graves.
Hmm.
I was like,
Who
oh,
does that to their child, or who changes their
I
name?
know. I was like, well, his full name is Robert, but he goes by Rob, and so he's Rob Graves. And of course, he even says like on the docuseries, he's pretty much heard it all as far as the jokes for his
Mhm.
name. And I was like, I'm with that kind of name, yes, I'm sure you have heard literally everything. So Mr. Graves is honestly the reason why we know a lot more as well, because he kind of opens the house up to the investigators, but he's also got in contact with Mark Goodyear. Now, what's interesting about Mark Goodyear, we learn more about whenever we also meet Jane, I think it's Gerlach, and Russ Walker, who are two paranormal investigators that decided that they wanted to do a documentary about Fox
That's where
Hollow.
I saw this.
Hmm.
It was a paranormal investigation.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So they go and they talk to Rob Graves, and Graves is like, you really need to talk to Mark Goodyear. He can give you guys a lot more information. So then they go in to get into contact with Mark Goodyear, and all of a sudden, he's telling them, well, wait, I didn't just meet Herb once. I was dating him for 2 years.
Yes, I remember this now. Yes, and this guy was kind of like out of his mind, like didn't want to ask certain
It was
questions.
weird. He's weird. So I'm watching, and I'm about to go into a little bit more information about like the information they discovered from him and what he told them, but it was weird. I have moments in my notes where I wrote down, this is weird. I don't like him because I was like so uncomfortable just like hearing how he's talking about this. So he sits there and at first he tells them that he told Herb that he was like, you're hurting people. Like after he came to from Herb strangling him, he's like, you're hurting people. I'm gonna go tell I don't believe that one bit, but he's like, I'm gonna go tell the
Yes.
police about this. Now, Graves does say that Goodyear is a masterful storyteller, and I can tell from some of the things that he says during it that he probably is kind of exaggerating some things and making it sound more than it is. But at the same time, there's certain ways that he describes things that just sends like chills down my spine. So Goodyear also stated that there was some drug use happening with Mr. Herb, which could also explain how he's able to move some things, because if you're on some really hard drugs, you're able to do some really crazy things that you normally would not be able to do. So perhaps that is why he's able to move these bodies, but I digress. So Jane and Russ ended up taking Goodyear to the house to have him talk about what he remembered. And he stated that he had seen a burn pile of bodies, like right outside a window. And as he's going through and telling them about this pile of burned bodies he saw, and then he sits there and he says that Baumeister would take out the teeth of the people and he'd throw them down the hall and this and that, the other. We're sitting there thinking, now why the hell didn't you just leave? Like, if
Or tell the police
you,
that in the beginning when you talked about a man that
yes,
picked you up.
yes, if
Yes.
you're sitting here and this man, because he kept saying, I was terrified. I was terrified. And I'm like, why didn't you had so many opportunities to leave and never look back. And you still kept coming back over and over and over and over to this guy who was quite obviously doing horrible, horrible things to people. I don't understand, which is also why I don't give him a lot of credence on his whole like, "Oh, I was so scared." Like, "No, you weren't. You didn't leave. No, you didn't leave at all." Now, another thing that is just really, really weird about the whole Goodyear situation is that the police have a transcript from Baumeister's attorney on, I think it's from November 29th, when he got a call from Baumeister. It's the last call that he ever made. And in this transcript, he's telling his attorney that he had gotten involved with some guy named Mark Goodyear. And he said that Mark was a really bad dude and was a real dangerous guy and was hoping that Mark wouldn't come after the Baumeister family after Herb was gone. That's sketchy.
Mhm.
That has me real sketchy. And so then from, and this is just what made me go, oh, Lord. Like, not too long after that scene where they're talking about the transcript of Baumeister calling his attorney, they go to this next scene where Goodyear is talking about how he's like, well, the one thing that just, brings peace to my heart. And he's talking about how the victims are now in a state of perfection in heaven. And I thought that phrasing was weird. I thought
Yeah.
that was weird.
Yeah.
Like, I understand being like, well, I'm just, I'm happy that they're no longer suffering and they're in heaven, but they're now in a state of perfection in heaven. I'm like, that sounds like some crazy talk if you ask me, but okay. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. And so then enter Steve Ainsworth, who was a cold case detective, and he's got a rap sheet of, he's done some crazy, crazy, crazy huge cases. Like, he'd even consulted on the John Benet Ramsey case. He's done a lot. And so he was helping Jellison, and he went through all the different evidence and transcripts and whatnot from the police to kind of see if there was anything to there being an accomplice. So his thoughts, I thought, were very, 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 very interesting. On the interview with Mark, so like the first one that he did with the police, where he was like, oh, I met a guy named Brian, blah, blah, blah. And Ainsworth said that the way that Mark describes the autoerotic asphyxia, he was like, the way he's describing it, that's what happens with strangulation. That's not what happens during this consensual act. He's describing strangulation. And he knows too many details to have only done that once, because he claimed the only time he'd ever done that was with that Brian or Herb during that moment. And so
Mhm.
he's like, that's already a red flag for me, is that he's describing true strangulation, which makes me think he's a lot more involved in this than what
Mhm.
he's leading on. Sorry, again, just casually. There we go. And then they go through and they show him some more of the footage that Jane and Russ had gotten of Goodyear walking them around the home and telling them about the home. And he noticed that Goodyear had taken his shoes off. So he's barefoot walking them around the home saying, I saw this, I saw that, this is what happened here. And what Ainsworth brought up, and I literally saw you make that face because I know that you're going to
Mhm.
have something to say about this. What Detective Ainsworth brought up was that biblically,
Yes.
Lord,
In Exodus,
you take your shoes off on holy ground.
inside the temple.
Yep. And so Ainsworth said that he kind of gets this feeling that Goodyear has this reverence for Fox Hollow. Like he almost sees it as holy ground, which is gross. Anyway,
But he didn't make others take their shoes off.
he didn't make others, but he did it himself. Now, what are your thoughts on him having a, and I don't know the exact word to use for this, but almost an unhealthy reverence, where to him, this is his sacred ground as compared to when you go to a church, this is a sacred ground for everybody. Like this kind of,
Well, so if you're looking at like the Exodus, the temple rites and stuff that's found in Exodus, where it's like these holy spaces required bare feet to avoid the way I look at that, there's a couple ways you can look at this. If we're looking at it the biblical way, you're avoiding any kind of defiling of the sacred ground. So you would not want anybody wearing shoes in there. You don't want anybody bringing that in at all. So if we're looking at it as a biblical thing in these holy spaces, everybody must take their shoes off. Kind of like when you enter a lot of Asian cultures will do that before you enter their homes, you have to take their shoes. You don't bring the outside world into this clean
mhm,
space.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah. But some shaman type rituals, and traditions, they view shoes as like barriers between the physical and spiritual. So this is where you get into the whole I don't think it's more of a biblical thing. I think of it more of like another type of ritual where there's something called grounding. Have you ever heard of grounding?
Vaguely, like in different from different perspectives, shall we say.
Yeah. So a lot of times people are doing this as a trend or as a all natural way to connect with the earth now when they're gardening or when they're walking around, they'll take their
Yeah.
shoes off and they call it yeah, they call it grounding or earthing or whatever they do. But the idea is your shoes break the barrier. So to stay connected between the two realms of earth and spirit, you need to have that off. So for that on a personal level, not everybody leg cramp. Holy crap, that hurt.
I'm so proud of you.
So on a personal level, you don't need to require everybody to take their shoes off for you to experience the connection between your physical and spiritual self to the ground and the earth beneath you. So I feel like it's more on that realm of it than
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the holy ground per se. I
It
think it's about
still could show him having that affection or that reverence for
reverence.
that place.
I don't know about reverence because if that was the case, he wouldn't be speaking ill of uh Herb in there. He wouldn't do that there. He wouldn't
He
desecrate it.
speaks Now this is the weird thing. When he goes to the house, he sits there and talks about how, and I'm not quoting him directly. I'm just kind of from memory. He's talking about how like, "Oh, I've always loved this house. Like it just wraps its arms around me." And I was like, "Oh, that's a."
Well, that's the house. That's the house in so think of the house as a temple,
Mhm.
a as a altar, and those bodies that have been placed there as the sacrifices given to open that portal,
Mhm.
which this is kind of where I'm going down the road when we spin this, is that is gonna be a direction I'm gonna take you in.
Well, see, and that's kind of honestly that's actually one of the things that they didn't talk about it exactly, but when they're going through and listing off like it could be this, it could be this, it could be this for their theories as to why Goodyear was involved and why they did it in general. They talk about cult-like activities,
Mhm.
which obviously is a little bit taken out of context, but they had
I'm
also
not sure about this fitting in one specific cult, unless obviously most serial killers kind of form their own religion anyways.
and then they'd also started wondering if Baumeister was using Goodyear as bait to lure victims to Fox Hollow, because Goodyear is a lot more open and approachable, and Baumeister just never was, which would make a lot of sense.
And with Goodyear being a community person, people would start whispering about him being gay, but knowing that Goodyear was, it could be like his conduit to get that's true.
Oh, yeah. And there were multiple witnesses that came to the police and gave evidence of Goodyear being a part of some of the awful things that were happening on Fox Hollow Farms. There was somebody named Leroy Bray who said that he had gone there because he was promised like more, partying basically. He was pretty sure that they had laced his drink with something because he had like one whiskey and Coke and all of a sudden started feeling like he was really, really gone. And he said that he watched as Baumeister shot someone in front of him on the patio, and Goodyear and another person held the victim's arms while he was shot so that he couldn't run.
Wow.
And then there was, and did they look at, did they didn't look into him at all. There was another one, I gotta see if I can find it. John Fulham was someone who had survived but was taken to Fox Hollow. He said he met up with a guy at the metro, followed him to Fox Hollow Farms. He said the guy was driving a dark truck and described the guy himself. But when he was shown pictures of Herb, he said, well, that wasn't the guy. And when he remembered the guy's name being Michael or Mark, and that the guy had claimed that he was house sitting for his boss.
Mm.
So he described Mark Goodyear. So these are at least two. There's more than just this, but at least two witnesses that talked about Goodyear being a part of the horrors happening at Fox Hollow Farms, and police never looked into him. Now, another thing, and this is the last thing I'll say before we'll start going into whatever crazy thing you're going to tell me tonight. But another thing about Goodyear. Oh my goodness, this man, I'm so sorry. This is all alleged. Of course, none of this has been proven, but all of this evidence I've given is all just things that we have found that is very suspicious. So another thing about Goodyear is for the past 30 years, when he agrees to interviews, he never shows his face. He always is like has his back turned or the camera's not completely on him. And even when they had the footage from Jane and Russ doing their paranormal
Paranormal.
documentary, goodness gracious, could not think of those words. They were only like the camera's only like on his legs, like as he's walking, or like kind of his torso. It never went up to his face. The last episode of this docuseries I watched in 2025 was the first time he did an interview where his face was shown. He
Really?
sat down, he did an interview where his face was shown. And Karissa,
Did he look at the camera?
he did. And it was the one of the weirdest interactions I've ever seen because the best way for me to describe it is he would change his personality within a second. He would like snap at the producer, but then all of a sudden covered up with a smile. Like completely different person. It was
The
weird.
eyes are the window to the soul.
It was weird. I was sitting there, like when I was watching him, I was like, he knows so much that he is not being honest about. And he's like making himself seem like he was just secondary to this. And I was like, no, there's no way. There's no way. Like he loves the attention he gets from telling these stories as long as he is not implicated. As long as he is only the one who watched it, not the one who participated. But the way he acts, I'm like, there's no way. I 100% believe that he was involved in some way. I don't think he just watched or just happened upon this person who was so dangerous and he was so scared that he didn't tell police. I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's Fox Hollow and Mark Goodyear, who is suspected allegedly to be somebody who might be an accomplice.
Yeah.
And now let's get to Karissa and see what you're going to talk about tonight.
Before I do that, because you brought up the whole him not making eye contact to avoid eye contact or whatever. That is part of like demon lore that you don't make eye contact. You priests were warned that demons may attack or mock for those that try to make direct gazes into them. So
I
that's
could
very
see it.
interesting.
I could see,
Yeah.
yeah, because he even like when he did look at the camera, but the producer had said, "Okay, you can just look at me." And even though he had said you can just look at me, there were times where he's looking all over the place. He's looking down. He's like getting him to actually pay attention was, and I mean, some people just have things like ADHD and whatnot, and that's just how they are. But the way that he would just like snap at him and then covered up by a smile and try to find a way to kind of brush it off like it was nothing. I was like, that is just so weird to just flip your personality like that within a second.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because even like witchcraft and voodoo and like the lore of the jinns and stuff, there's a lot that has to do with the eyes and how, like the demon sight, and there's a whole thing about that. That's a whole nother podcast episode. We'll
So,
talk about we'll find a case about eyes, and then we'll talk about those demons.
ooh, I don't know if we want to. If we do a case about eyes, my eyes will start watering bad. That is one thing when it comes to vet and med. Most of the surgeries and stuff we do like don't bother me, but anytime we have to do any kind of surgery on the eye, I'm like trying to monitor while my eyes are sitting there twitching and watering, and I'm like, I can't watch this.
Oh yeah, that I couldn't imagine getting LASIK surgery because it would freak me out having that needle come to your. Mm-mm, mm-mm, no, ma'am. Mm-mm. Okay. Well, so Willow, you had mentioned bones on the property, obviously, when we were talking here, but this
Heck
is one
yeah.
of the clues that you had given me because you didn't give me a lot of details. And I did not remember even watching the paranormal thing. And I don't even remember it. I just remember images. I do not remember details. Only the images of the pool with the mannequins, and the house, and then the driveway with the fox hollow. I just
Well,
remember those.
probably because the mannequins in the pool were like the most disturbing
Mhm.
thing.
Well, I just
I'm not
remember it being in the
surprised.
night light, where they use their night camera, night visions.
Mm-mm.
I just remember that, and then I don't think there was any water in the pools or anything like that at the time when they were doing this investigation. Actually, I think that maybe even Ghost Adventures did this house as well.
Wouldn't be surprised. I didn't look to see if they did, but I
Yeah.
would not be surprised
Yeah,
whatsoever.
so it was definitely a paranormal investigation that I was watching when I remember this house because I
But yeah.
remember the color of the scream being sort of like the when they're investigating
Like
the range,
that, like, green, not yeah,
greenish blue. Yeah. But you did give me a little brief thing about the property having all these bones on it, and so I didn't really wanna go down the idea of bone collecting because we did that a couple weeks ago
yeah.
with the tooth fairy, so I wanted to take a different approach. But when you said that the killer had buried bones and there were bones throughout this whole property, my first thought to you was Stonehenge.
Yes, yeah, you had mentioned something about that.
Yeah, that was my first immediate thought. So I had visited Stonehenge in 2020 with a theory in my head, and we're not gonna go down my theories of the unintentional areas where things happen, but we're gonna focus
That's a
more
whole
on.
nother podcast episode.
I know, right? But tonight I thought I'd give you my thoughts surrounding haunted lands and the portals that are located there after death. Facts. Let's talk about the facts, people. Okay, facts. Not every place where someone dies is haunted. We know that. Okay? Facts. Sometimes hauntings are linked to items and possessions that from the dead people. It's not
Yes.
always a location because if you move the item, the ghost tends to follow.
Mhm.
Okay? Not every ghost is vengeful.
True.
Also, not every ghost is a woman in white, though there do seem to be
So
a lot
true.
of them. There do seem to be a lot of scorned women roaming the world with their dresses
There'd be
on.
lots of scorned women putting their wedding dresses on.
Although that would be kinda creepy, these Renaissance dresses and I mean, that it's just perfect. It's like, "Thanks for setting up this lore. Everybody that dies must have a dress." You get that at the gates of hell.
Like, "Alright, pick out a dress." So just
"Pick
have
out
this
your gown for the
giant, like
haunting."
this giant closet. Go ahead and peruse your haunting gowns now.
Yes, yes. We do know through, a lot of pseudoscience that a lot of, locations of high death, like, civil war areas, hospitals, places where there is a high amount of death, or even burial grounds or cemeteries, there is, a little bit more of an increase of electromagnetic energy, okay? That's facts,
Mhm.
or pseudo facts. So then before you I did Google if this place was known for being haunted. I looked for a simple yes or no. I did not go
Mhm.
deep diving into it. I didn't wanna know anything. So I was just like, it said it was. So I'm like, "Okay, we can go haunting on this one." And then now that I remember, I'm like, "Oh, I do remember this having stuff."
I mean,
But
there's so many dead bodies. I see t I'm gonna make that into a little video, I want you to know. One of my little videos that I put on Instagram,
but
this
are
is
they
gonna end
wearing
up on there.
dresses?
Where they
Are they really dead if they're not wearing a white wedding dress?
Are you really dead though? Where's your yeah, next time I see a ghost, and even if it's a man, if they're not in a dress, I will stop and be like, "I know you're trying to be scary, but where is your dress? This is not good
Right?
enough. This
Where
is
is
not
your
on par."
lacy white dress? Okay, so again, like I said, I'm not going down my theories of haunted locations and why areas kind of naturally pull more than others, but I wanted to talk more about the unintentional man-made ones like Fox Hollow Farms. And so I'm gonna kind of break it into two categories. We're gonna talk about the property as like a sacred killing ground. We talked about that with the shoe removal and like being sacred, but like what type of sacred? And for the second part, I'm just gonna do like a small little snippet and thought process of the unquiet dead and how like sometimes when bones are removed from their body and like separated, it creates this unfinished burial, so they're not properly buried. Uh,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, so I'm just gonna break it into two parts. I thought that'd be a good way to kind of look at the haunting of this place and how it might work. So let's talk about the land itself. Because Fox Hollow Farm wasn't like this just burial site, like we talk in the house. It was carefully curated killing field with these parallels that kind of, if you know a lot of the ancient burial rites and a lot of the things that happened in ancient times, it's very mirror. I'm going to use the word
Mhm.
mirroring to ancient sacrificial grounds. So Herb and whoever his crew of mortal, we need like a soul sucking squad for the mortals though.
We'll come up with it.
Yeah, yeah, yes. Or we could just call them men and make the MEN because I
Men.
know that sometimes it's usually just white men,
The white man.
just the white men. But Herb didn't just like dump bodies and hide. He like hid them in
Mhm.
these pits and scattered them across this large piece of property.
Yeah, like all over the forest.
Yeah, like in the woods, like in the water, and that's the thing, and I'm gonna connect this here in a minute, and this is completely unintentional. I'm giving you some connections between land and water, not even knowing that he put him in the water prior to this. But others were even, like, again, near his pool, there's the water again, but I don't think this stuff was random. Whoever was doing this was being tapped into something. They were there whether Herb was, like, the minion to this other guy, who the
Mhm.
leader was, I don't know. But someone was leading these people to create these sacred boundaries within their killing field, for sure. But again, I looked up a video, like I told you earlier, on the
Mhm.
placement,
Yeah.
and I didn't look at the case details, but when I did go onto the timestamp where it plotted some of these victims, it was almost a complete circle.
I
And
don't like that.
there was overlap, so it was making it more of a condensed space of where these places where they were finding these bodies.
Ew.
And we know, like I said, in archaeology, we see this pattern in places like Stonehenge, as I mentioned, when I went there in 2020, and I learned there that there's several rings within Stonehenge, and there's, like, these
Mhm.
outer kind of post holes,
Yeah.
and in those surrounding post holes that surround the dolomite stones, some idiot, 1920s, dug up the remains and just put all of the remains that were under these post holes into under one. So, underneath these post holes used to be bodies.
Wow.
And archaeology has literally linked these bodies to be descendants from the area of, like, Wales and stuff, so these people traveled a great distance to here to either be sacrificed or their bodies were brought there to be buried for a
So
specific reason.
interesting.
Yes. Anyways, now, so when I visited this, I had a theory about how locations pull energy. They're like man-made pulling devices. They're
Mhm.
almost creating like these ancient energy sources to be able to open portals or create vortexes. And I used this in my second book, Four Rivers, when the devil actually visits Stonehenge with another character and they're in the center and like the environment changes. And they're able to open a portal as the devil is looking for Alexis. So I
Mhm,
use
mhm.
this same ideology in finding realms. So if you're creating these, like, realms with dead bodies, you're almost creating this sacred location that links you to the underworld, per se.
And that's why Goodyear's taking his shoes off.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so the
Makes me
what
uncomfy.
what'd you say?
I said, "That makes me uncomfy."
It's very uncomfortable in my mind. Don't know where I want to store that. Okay, so have you heard of bogs? You know what a bog is? Like those.
Yeah, yeah, and the bog people, like,
Yep,
the mummified people that are, like,
right.
perfectly mummified in the bog, yeah.
Yes, and we know that from Egyptians, mummified bodies are sometimes believed that that's to keep the body, like, kinda connected to its soul or whatever, but the bogs of Northern Europe, where the Iron Age cultures left victims in these wetlands as, like, offerings to the gods, they believe that these, like, liminal spaces, which are like that land and where the land and the water meets, these
Mhm.
were literal gateways to the underworlds. Cause so here's our surface, here's these bogs, and then there's the underworld. So they believe that
Ooh.
kind of like but you can
Wow.
kinda see that if you were looking at it from like a if you cut it in half, how the
Yeah.
layers would be. Yeah, yeah. But I wanna consider some of his behavior, like you were talking, luring victims from gay bars would be considered like his hunting his then the thought of his estate being somewhat secluded, the farm is secluded. So it's a
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very private realm where he controlled life and death for whoever. Whether it was him or a
Yeah.
group of people, life and death was being controlled here by those who were in control. These necromancers, whatever they're consider themselves to be, which kind of made me think of this kind of Roman thing called fanum. And this is like a I have to like catch my thoughts here because I'm trying to it's a Roman thing. I'm not super well versed on it. I just remember it, a little bit to
Yeah.
where I was able to look it up because I was like, "Ooh, this kinda reminds me of this." I'm like, I gotta go down this little rabbit hole here." So fanum is a piece of land that is demarcated as sacred, often marked by a temple or an altar, and it's referred to be like a physical zone where gods and mortals can interact. It's usually through, like, sacrifice or, like, votive offerings, so
Mhm.
it has some, like, keys that I feel like fit this narrative with this person as you're talking now that I'm thinking about it because it has the boundaries. Oh, throw your mic away, what are we doing here? So it has the boundaries, like you talked about having, like, these bodies all around the property. It has all these offer it has the offerings of the humans that they feel to be
Yeah.
maybe they could feel them to be, like, worthy of, like, dying for their cause or whatever.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the thing with these phantoms are that they are for gods that are kind of the margins. So, like, many of these deities were the underworld gods or spirits.
Mm.
Yeah, and they were kind of outside of city walls, places where the veil between the worlds were very thin. And
Gotcha,
it's very
gotcha.
interesting, you see that in a lot of different cultures where it's,
Yeah.
like, the levels and of their deities, and sometimes the further out are the darker ones. So, it kinda made me think of it because, like, has these sacred borders, of the from the profane world that they feel like is out there, and then they're anybody violating those borders, it's taboo, so you have these people that they're bringing in there, and
Mhm.
maybe when they start to do certain things and the people are violating the acts, they kill them.
And, like, yeah, yeah, because some of them could have been brought as an actual, like, okay, your only purpose is to be a sacrifice.
Well,
But there
and
were
that's the thing,
people who were
though.
brought there that survived too.
Well, the one guy said he watched someone get shot,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then didn't and somebody else survived, right? There was a
Mhm.
couple. Yeah. So that's the thing, though. Maybe for some strange reason, people that weren't going along with it were just offered a sacrifice. Like, well, you're not going with it. You're going because you can't go back out into that world and tell people what's happening here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, if they didn't wanna go along with it, or if they went and, they were trying to say, like, "Oh, we're gonna do XYZ, like, you be a part of it," and they were like, "No, I don't want any part of this," and it's like, "Well, now that you know, you can't go back out there.
Mhm.
Now that you know about what's happening here, we can't let you live."
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea of having this dark fonum, I mean, the boundaries are there, the offerings of the dead are there, and there's that link to the underworld. It's all right there, like, they're
Oh,
using, like,
yeah.
the necromancy stuff and whatever. Especially if he was walking around with his bare feet, that's crazy.
It was just so I'm telling you, Carissa, it was weird. Now that I've told you the story, you can go and watch this.
Yeah, I will.
You can go I think it's 4 parts, but especially the end. The last episode is when they do the interview with Goodyear. It's just he's just weird. And I say that in the most morbid sense because it just sent chills down my spine. I was like, I don't know how to feel about this person, but I instinctively do not like this person. There is something wrong about this person.
Yeah.
And I don't get that feeling about a lot of people. And it could even be just me being influenced by the information that was previously presented and me coming up with my own opinions and then those opinions being reflected on this person. But it was just like the second that he started talking, I was like, no, 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 no.
No, sir. I don't
I
think
was like,
so.
no, I do not like you. You're giving me the ick, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so side note.
Mhm.
Before I go on to kind of, like, talking about more, the Fanums, like, the rituals and, like, the quirks of it, I wanted to kinda give you a little idea about who I think might be responsible, the who's who of the demons and the demon gods who
Who's
might be
who?
responsible for these weird actions. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna it's not super dark, I mean, it's just mild spicy. It's like a level 1
It says like
Indian food.
salsa. This is your restaurant salsa,
It's
it's
a
fine.
mild pad thai.
A mild pad thai.
So the queen of the underworld, okay,
Mhm.
Ereshkigal. So Ereshkigal is the queen of the underworld, whose name literally means queen of the great below, and she ruled over Kur, and this is like the Sumerian underworld. But like, there's a lot of you've got different ones, of course, but this is like I'm going back to some of the oldest
Mhm.
recorded stuff. But she was absolutely a terrifying authoritarian. Unlike most underworld gods like Hades and all those, she wasn't a passive ruler, she embodied death itself, like,
Wow.
force and both feared and, like, revered, like, she was the ultimate
Goodness, yeah.
epitome of the ruler of the underworld, what you would think. not one that's in the Disney movie for Hercules. You know? We're not making the yeah. So her role, she ruled over the dead and like they basically lived in darkness and they were eating dust. Her place was
They
said to
lived
be
in the
guarded.
darkness and they were eating dust.
Yeah. Her place, Ganzier, was kind of guarded by these scorpion people
Ooh.
with like these yeah, and they were filled with skeletal spirits. It's kind of crazy. But it fits because she demanded an annual funeral rites and neglected souls became like hungry ghosts and much like Fox Hollow, a lot of the unidentified victims could be a part of what she feeds off of
Wow.
that are gathered by her like little scorpion people that kind of, are the little henchmen, which is
Yeah.
they're controlled by her husband, which is a whole nother like god of plague and death. I love that the underworld is ruled by a woman though at the same
I know,
time.
yeah. I was about to say, I was like, girl power
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, girl pop. Her husband, Nurgle, he almost sounds like a
Nurgle.
yes,
Nargle.
or Nergal. I mean, it's still it's weird
Okay.
what no matter way you say it.
Nargle's a little bit better, but Nurgle.
He disseminated armies, like, presided over, like, graves, and his whole thing was his cults of things left corpses exposed by like, anybody that kinda followed him would leave corpses exposed to the vultures, kind of how,
Mm.
Burmeister or Baumeister left
Mhm.
remains to be just left
Yeah.
to the yeah,
Just
just be
left
left
it
to the
there.
vultures, and then
Mhm.
who cares what happens to them?
Literally.
Um, yeah. So that's very paralleled there. Also, this husband, his priests in the physical world would wear red robes that were symbolizing like blood and contamination as a symbol of death, whereas Baumeister had this thrift store of people's, stuff that may have
Yeah.
kept their energy.
Wow.
Yeah. But the demons that they had in this underworld, these enforcers that would drag the souls to Kerr, they were described as like human shape but fleshless, and they would dig up graves. So if these demons were targeting those who had died violently or without like rights and stuff,
Mhm.
this would be all of his victims. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Yeah.
absolutely, and, like, how they say they dig up the graves and the fact
Mhm.
that a lot of these bones were just out there.
Mhm.
Like, you just pick it up off the ground, and it's like an entire femur, you know?
Mhm. So the Faunum I was mentioning earlier, so
Mhm.
something about this one that I felt like kept paralleling with some of the things when you did mention shoes.
Mhm, mhm.
There were some quirks with the priests that would follow strict protocols when they were in this location, when they were in the Faunum's location, washing hands, wearing special garments, preparing themselves. The shoe thing is mirroring that, but that's everybody's doing that. So I feel like this is more of like somewhere more along the lines of like a personal level. Like it's almost like Mormons, for example, before they bless a temple, anybody can enter a temple that is
Mhm.
built. So anybody can take a tour of a Mormon temple and look at the beautiful rooms and like see this.
Yeah.
But once it's blessed, you cannot enter unless you have a temple recommend. And before it's blessed, it's just architecture with beautiful surfaces. After it's blessed, it only has meaning to those who are in there. So for him
Dang.
taking his shoes off, it's only has meaning to him.
To him,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. The other people who enter, it's not that you're no one. You don't even understand. So it doesn't matter if you take your shoes off. You take your shoes off, you're not going to reap the benefits of this sacred ground.
Which goes even more to show that he either just knew more or he is a lot more involved
Yeah.
than what he's saying, than what he'll
Especially since it was
admit.
a habit that he just
Yes,
did it.
every single time. Always
Mhm.
takes his shoes off when he goes in that house.
Mhm. Yeah.
Always does.
Well, and so I wonder, I don't know if you covered this or when you were reading stuff, if any of the remains appeared to be disturbed after, almost like, did he ever move them or did that guy
So
talk about moving them?
they did speculate that perhaps he might have, because after that his son found that skull, they suspected that he may have gone through and moved some of the remains that had been around that area. Or, which, I mean, either or he had just changed his dumping area and started dumping in another spot where his son wouldn't be. But they did talk about speculation that he had moved remains because his son had found the skull. He didn't want them to find the rest of what was on the farm.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, definitely the scattered bones definitely suggest that this was a property treated like a temple,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that whoever, whether it was Herb or whether it was this, the Mark guy
Mhm.
or whoever, they thought themselves to be a high priest, for sure.
The way
They were
Mark
somehow
acts, yeah.
what is it?
I said the way this Mark guy acts, yeah, because he
And with his Herb's suicide, he may have thought that now he's the next in line.
Oh,
So
I didn't think about that.
he may not have been the original high priest, but Herb did Herb did, like, essentially, flee
Mhm.
his altars, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? He
Yeah.
fled away from his sacred ground, and he left his altars to where maybe he was no longer safe with the demons he kept, and oh my gosh. So when he's in Canada, he's now kind of like, what they would call, like, blood guilt per se, because
Mhm.
he's
Mhm.
outside of that energy field, and so now with him being dead, which is actually pretty common with serial killers, by the way,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mark takes up the mantle, and he is now the
Mhm.
high priest.
Well, and the interesting thing too, when I had said before that I had a thought about why, he didn't say anything about the remains found on the farm. In the call he made to his attorney, he told his attorney that he had written other letters for his children, for his wife. And he said, "Oh, they're hidden and blah 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 blah." I can't remember. It was some cabinet somewhere. They never found those letters. So there's a
Mm,
possibility that he does actually talk about what happened to his wife and or to his children, most likely just to his wife, but he never found those letters, so we don't know.
hmm. Alright, well, we're almost out of time, but I do wanna quickly give my second part, which is the little small closing of the unquiet dead idea, and this is
Mhm.
kinda like the curse by the unfinished burials,
Mhm.
especially if some of these were, like, not properly buried, or some of them were separated from their skulls, separated from the lower parts. So this is, like, fun facts here. Archaeologists will let you in on a little secret that, well, it's not really a secret, but improper burials are a near universal trigger for the supernatural dread within cultures. Like, there are so many cultures. Huh?
That's wild
Yes.
that, because obviously these cultures are from obviously all around the world, and until somewhat recently in history, we just didn't really have that kind of connection
Mhm.
to be able to be like, "Oh, you believe in that? Yeah, me too." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that's
Well,
really fascinating.
yeah, there's something called I think it's called like a drogar. I know the word itself reminds me of dragon, but it's like a Norse mythology thing. And I'm not super well versed
Yeah.
on Norse mythology, but I know something about the fact that if and I probably picked this up on Supernatural, the show, but the thought process, knowing about these things, if the soul is improperly buried, that the corpse will actually haunt their killers. You know, you see that sometimes in ghost stories. So,
Yeah.
Herb could have been being haunted or whatever, but, you know, but
Soupy killed all those people, like, I'm telling you, somebody killed me, I'd find a way to haunt them.
yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
had
like
somebody, was gonna say I had somebody just super quick aside, I had somebody come in today who they have a adorable Pomeranian who they had rescued because it belonged to his mother-in-law, and when she had passed away, the one of the sons was like just gonna take the dog to the pound, and they were like, "No, no, we're gonna keep this dog." And he was like, he goes, "If somebody tried to take my dog to the pound after I pass away, I don't know how to come back from the dead, but I sure as hell would."
mm,
Anywho, so
there's that.
there's that. Yeah.
So, I mean, so we'll never obviously know if Herb believed in ghosts or whether he killed these people and created ghosts. I mean, his actions, created obviously these lingering ghosts of the people who are unsettledly left there
Yeah.
without their names being attached to their bones. I mean,
Mhm.
which is sad. So sad. And I doubt that modern forensics can technically get through all of them and find out. I mean, hopefully they can, but it'd be
I
very
mean, yeah,
surprising.
they're still trying to. So obviously, if you're in the Indianapolis, Indiana, Westfield area and you have a family member who you suspect could have possibly been a victim, or even if you had a family member who just disappeared around that time and you have no leads, go ahead and start contacting the authorities to see if you can submit a sample of your DNA for them
Mm.
to start testing against, because they've got, that's what they're doing right now, is collecting samples of DNA to try and compare and see if they can identify some of these remains. So if you're listening and you're from that area, or if you know somebody from that area and they have a family member who might be one of these victims,
Maybe if you can if you find me a link, we can put that on Facebook or socials and maybe say, hey, if you don't even in the area, like blah, 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 that went missing in the past, put this out there.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
start
I'll find you a link.
your DNA.
So by the time this comes out, there's going to be a link for you to submit your DNA.
I think that it'd be nice if everybody. I'm not. Listen, people all we're going to talk about this because this is where people think that you shouldn't have your DNA markers, your social security number, all these things that are like the mark of the beast. You shouldn't have these
Mm,
things done because it labels you, it puts you it's like all these signs and stuff.
mm-mm, mm-mm.
You have nothing to
That
hide.
is, that is one thing I do not believe in. I'm
What?
very open to most other things, but this, like my social security number is the mark of the beast. No,
Well, I'm
no,
going to
that's my
talk about this in our
identifier.
next episode, the
I
mark of the
know.
beast, because it's not. The
I was
mark of the
about to
beast
say,
is darn people.
I was like, if you are about to ruin this for me, if you're about to ruin my social security number for me,
No, I'm not. I'm gonna make you feel more secure
thank you.
and explain to you how it's political and ancient political, not modern, ancient political.
We deal in ancient politics, not
Mhm.
modern. Just we're gonna
Yes.
go ahead and put that out there.
Mhm. Yeah, we're gonna talk about the old people that are dead and buried and rolling in
Dead and
their
buried and
graves.
gone.
Yes, yes. But until then, you can follow us on our social media by going to theparallaxpodcast.com. Click on those two cute little icons down there at the bottom. And then, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can go to our email, info@theparallaxpodcast.com, and send us a little email, shout out, whatever you want to do. Give us some interesting stories you want us to cover, or tell us a story that you experienced that you want us to share on the pod. And we'll do that. Until then, though, I'm Karissa.
And I'm Willow.
Thanks for listening.
Go my mortals.